reps may reconvene to consider downward review of 10.59 trillion 2020 budget. Yeah, that's all on the front page of Tribune newspaper. Back to Kemi.
All right, that's all we could take on the front page of the Nigerian newspaper. We took the Punch newspaper, we took the Nation newspaper, the Guide, and of course the Nigerian Tribune. So we'll be taking a look at some of the stories, and we have with us someone who will be doing some of this analysis, and we'll be talking about these top stories we have in the national newspaper. We have here with us Oladimeji Salako, a public affairs analyst. Many thanks for joining us this morning.
My pleasure.
You're welcome on the program.
Thank you.
All right, we are the common story we have on the national newspaper are stories about the coronavirus, the COVID-19, and all of the. What would you say as regards the affected ones? Because now the senators, they are panicking. The presidential villa as a whole, they are in panic because some of these officials are affected. So what do you have to say as regards this?
Yeah, I think that it is sad and unfortunate that our leaders thought the epidemic was fictive. It was an illusion, something that is not real. Or they were so overburdened with the conspiracy theory that it is a mode of power politics by the world powers, and then there are no possibilities, or the possibility that is going to affect Nigeria is very low. Because it was avoidable. There are still some African countries that have not been affected.
Yeah.
So it therefore means, and then we were fortunate then because we had privileged information to international news, international happenings. And at that time, we expected that these officials would have been proactive enough to bring about most of these policies they are now trying to enforce in Nigeria now. So for me, I think that the state at which we are today in Nigeria is partly caused by the negligence of our leaders, who by all indications are now the most affected. And partly with the people who have not been able to accommodate the sacrifices expected of us as a nation.
All right, thank you so much for that. We can see that in the front pages of the Guardian, the Tribune, and of course, Punch and the Nations. Yeah, it says fear in government circles as Kyari Bauchi governors test positive. And Nigeria now has 44 cases. Right now, we had 2 more cases this morning, just at exactly 7 o'clock this morning. The NCDC announces 2 more cases. That is 1 in Lagos and 1 in Ogun State. Now, let's talk about the precautionary measures that people have been told to stay at home, to isolate, to self-isolate. And some of us are not actually adhering to that policy that has been set out to us. What do you have to say as regards that?
Yeah, self-isolation is one of the very critical and important measures to prevent this, the further escalation of this pandemic. But with all due respect to our policymakers, we should understand that policy are not independent. Policy are expected to be built on a structure, on an existing structure. And then if you are talking about structure, you can talk about social structure. Social structure would mean the religious system in that environment. Social structure will also accommodate the standard of living of the people. Social structure will also accommodate the public acceptability of government policies. Social structure will also accommodate level of literacy, level of education of the people, the level of sophistication of the people. So you cannot just impose a policy without having an existing concrete structure. So, for example, if you ask people to go on self-isolation, and then you complain that citizens are not complying, what is the level of citizens' compliance to previous or existing laws? This has been part of our culture, to be negligent. I think in my introductory letters, I have also talked about the negligence of even lawmakers. It was Abakari who, I think 3 or 4 days ago, mentioned that the lawmakers were not consenting to instructions at the airport. So our compliance system to laws pre-COVID-19 is faulty. So if you think citizens will just wear, a kind of compliance, immediate compliance to laws, it's something that is far from. It's an illusion. Secondly, if you ask people to go on self-isolation, it therefore means that you have an existing structure to accommodate the consequences, to address the consequences of self-isolation. One of the consequences of self-isolation is no work. If you look into no work and you say government want to pay salaries for people who are not working, one is a deficit to government. Number 2, we are not running a socialist economy whereby all workers work under government. What about those in the private sectors, particularly the informal sectors, the informal substructure of the private sector? I'm talking about those who will not eat or earn income if they don't trade. They don't go out in the day.
Without daily wages.
Daily wages. So how will they self-feed themselves in their confinement of self-isolation?
Speaking of that, you know that people have been telling the government to lock down. There should be a total lockdown. And comment from people says that what about those who earn wages, and how would they be able to fend for themselves if there's a total lockdown in Lagos? Let me just say Lagos for now. If there's a total lockdown in Lagos, what do you have to say as regards people need a total lockdown?
We must conceptualize for who are those agitating or advocating for a total lockdown. You see, this is Lagos. We all come from our house. I don't think we all slept here. We come from our house. What we have seen on the road, does it showcase or display that people are, the people as in the masses, are agitating for a total lockdown, for a lockdown, not even total? The road is busy, busy as usual. When I say busy as usual, I mean those in the informal sectors who will not eat if they don't go out to trade are on the street. They want survival. The standard of the living will mean food, shelter, clothing. These people cannot get or have access to these basic necessities without going out. So if you ask them to stay back in their house, then it means that you want to kill them before COVID-19. So the idea that we must wholesale or impose policy of other nations may not work here, because I said that in those areas they have existing structure.
Yeah.
They have. Do we even have data of people who are jobless? Do we have data of people who are even with the cases of COVID-19? Do we have data of those that are suspected? Do we have data of those coming in of Lagos, going out of Lagos? So when you these are structures that allows an easy implementation of policies like this, that you don't even need to spend a whole lot of money.
Okay, so are you saying that a total lockdown is impossible? Because considering Sanwo-Olu's address yesterday to the populace, he mentioned that fine, there will be a lockdown, but with the exception of those that sell necessities like food,
the
water,
medical, pharmaceutical store.
So does it mean that there won't be a total lockdown? Fine, there might be some, people staying at home, self-isolating and all that. But with those that are selling some of these necessities, because the truth is we need it to survive. That means, are you saying there's nothing like
a total lockdown anywhere in Nigeria, particularly Lagos, is impracticable?
Oh, okay.
You see, policies should be implemented.
Okay.
But you can only implement an implementable policy. A policy that is implemented.
Please say that again.
You can only implement an implementable policy.
Policies.
Okay.
Yeah.
You see, there are policies that, no matter how, police or soldiers you put on the road, it cannot work. I am not trying to subvert, the policy or the law of government. I'm not trying to act recalcitrant to, to power. But these policies cannot survive because of our existing realities in Nigeria. I'm not even talking about Lagos again. In Nigeria. Existing realities. Over there in the UK or in the US. Just yesterday I was watching CNN and I found that there are non-governmental organizations on the street of London distributing food. This is coming after the UK government herself had, make certain arrangements for people, because you cannot keep people indoor without providing
their daily needs.
I mean, basic
needs.
Food is very, very important. Water.
Yes.
I mean, go to Abeokuta in Ogun State. They are suffering for water. They don't have access to water. I have a colleague who tell me that he doesn't bath 3 days, 2 days.
That's not
so that's terrible. So how could these people, and then when they want to get water, even on Friday or on the weekend, they have to wake as early as 5 a.m.
to get water.
They will return back to their house until 9, 10 a.m. So how do you think they can have access? That is even when they go out. How then do you think they can have access to water if they are indoor?
Anyway,
so there are critical issues that should be addressed.
Thank you so much for that. Away from the issue of coronavirus, there were panic yesterday as a new strain of virus claims life in China again, antivirus. It says that amid seeming inability to contain the coronavirus, which broke out in China and is fast ravaging many other countries, there was panic yesterday as another strain of deadly virus called antivirus claimed one life in the same China. A person from Yuan province died while on his way back to Shandong province for work on a chartered bus on Monday. That was yesterday, and it was tested off antivirus. And this is actually creating panic. People are panicked as regards this. Anyway, we are just hoping that this will also be curtailed, and it won't be like the coronavirus that we'll have to get to other parts of the country. All right, still on the front page of the newspaper, we have Boko Haram insurgents ambush kill 47 soldiers in Borno. Now, speaking of insurgency in Nigeria, the insecurity of Nigeria it's like it's getting worse day by day. Because even before now, we've been talking about kidnapping, we've been talking about bandits, Boko Haram, and all of those. So, what can you see as regards the insecurity in Nigeria?
Yeah, insecurity in Nigeria is very complex, and as I'd always like to say, the total gamut of insecurity also includes the ongoing pandemic in Nigeria. We've had our experiences on a whole lot of social security measures in Nigeria, and then the issue need to be addressed. And if we want to address the insecurity in Nigeria, we must understand the conceptual origination of it. What are the causes of insecurity in Africa? There's a kind of a peculiar theoretical framework that explains insecurity in Africa, not just Nigeria. You know? So you talk about social cleavages, ethnicity, religion, cultural diversities, and all of that. And if you look into the issues of Boko Haram insurgency, it can still be captured within that circle. So I think again that it therefore means that it is difficult for government to address the menace of insecurity in Africa. Very difficult. It has to be bottom-top and not top-bottom approach.
That's start from the grassroots.
From the grassroots, from the people. So you must therefore be looking into social re-engineering. You must begin to look into reorientation. You must begin to look into literacy, educating the people. You must be looking into addressing certain issues of economic and social marginalization. You must begin to look into social injustices, because one of the agitations that we saw on the surface of Boko Haram ravaging started with social injustices of their leader. We also had the rumor of fighting against Western civilization and all of that. So if we are looking into the total gamut of insecurity in Nigeria, we must not just look at it from the point of using gun to fight armed bandits. We must address social, economic, political, structural issues. Because if insurgents don't have who will work with them, it's one way of containing insurgency. So there is a usual or famous aphorism that says that an idle hand
is the devil's workshop.
So people who don't get employed, who are jobless, who don't have access to education, they are easily vulnerable to be used as perpetrators to commit these atrocities. So and then if they also don't eat, people who are poor, who don't have access to basic economic needs, they are also vulnerable to be used. So if you are looking into addressing the issue of insecurity, insurgency in Nigeria, it goes beyond just saying that you have budgeted trillions of naira for buying a particular weapon or whatever. And you must also understand the international dimension of it. So if we are to get serious to fight against insurgency. Unfortunately, fighting against terrorism is very difficult because you don't even have the indication that it has been fought successfully. It has been, we have emphasized that even when insurgents or terrorists, when they keep quiet, it is also a strategy to get hard on government. Because at that time, government get resilient.
And then they go back to strategize. And get heavily hard at government.
All right, thank you so much for that analysis. Okay, now something just caught my attention in the Nigerian Tribune. It says India locks down 1.3 billion population. Locks down 1.3 billion population. This is a country that I think they have the highest resources for quarantine. Indian, and they've been able to lock down 1.3 billion population. So I think it's a good thing for them. And also, COVID reps takes CBN to fund establishment of emergency centers. And that's in the Nigerian Tribune. And we have coronavirus, Lagos, Edo, Ondo, Plateau, Osun, short markets, parks, stores. Most states order workers to stay at home. NAS adjourns for 2 weeks. Just in Lagos, the Lagos State Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu yesterday directed that all open markets and stores should close, except for sellers of food and medicines, medical equipment, and other essential life-saving products. He was briefing journalists. The media, the governor stated that for those that fall into the aforementioned categories, it is imperative that they observe necessary precautionary measures of social distancing. And I think right even here in the studio, we're trying to maintain the social distance because it's very, very important that we'll maintain it. And what I would love to say before we go on a short break is that we Nigerians, it's high time we adhere to whatever has been we have been told by the government about social distancing. And some people, but I don't know if you notice, some people don't actually know the difference between social distancing, self-isolation, quarantine. They don't actually know the difference. I don't know if you can.
But I think that's the problem with Nigeria as a country when it comes to issues like this. When you tell people to self-isolate, to quarantine, the thing is, there's what is called sensitization, if I'm correct.
Thank you.
You properly sensitize the people, because the truth is, some people in this part of the world
don't
still
know about it, especially people from the rural areas. Now, that will actually lead me to this question that I want to ask, because we'll still go back to the difference between self-isolation, quarantine, and
measures,
social distancing. Now, there's so many people that you will ask them if they are aware about the coronavirus. Now, the WHO has tried to enlighten people, but some people still don't know about this, especially people in the rural areas. What do you have to say as regards such thing?
The WHO, we should get it right, is an agency of the UN. The United Nations is a global international organization that has its members drawn from different countries, representing their people. So when WHO is speaking to the government of the state. So the government should decentralize. They have the responsibility to decentralize this information. It doesn't stop there. To domesticate this information in their own language.
Okay.
If the WHO has used for example, the social media to disseminate information to Nigeria, the government should not rely on that medium,
alone,
thinking that the people that they represent have fathom or decipher this information. For crying out loud, we have about more than 300 languages in Nigeria.
Yeah.
And we have people who don't understand English language, who don't even have access to social media, they don't even have access to conventional media platforms. So agencies like the National Orientation Agency comes into the mind. But unfortunately, that agency has been dormant for a very long period of time. Also, what is the role of local government? And that is why I was saying that, you see, you don't build policies without existing structures. If we had gotten our local government system right in Nigeria, this issue you have just, the question you have raised would have been irrelevant. Because part of the responsibility, the duties of the local government system is public advocacy, sensitization, orientation, reorientation of the people, to domesticate and decentralize the information from the up down to the bottom, to the grassroots, in the language that the people understand. What is also, aside from the local government system, what is also the role of our traditional rulers? Yeah. The traditional rulers also have a huge role to play. But unfortunately, what we have seen has been misplaced priority of even the traditional rulers who are closer. In fact, they are perhaps the closest to the people. They have this cultural affinity. They have this. They are expected, not apt. They are expected to have this cultural affinity, this emotional concern on the lives and properties of their subjects. But what we have seen is that, in fact, some of them are not even in the country. What we have seen is that some of them even attend social functions, misplaced priority. So we cannot blame WHO or blame, in some part, the federal government. We have existing structures that are dormant, existing structures that are feckless, existing structures that have become useless. They have not, because you must talk about the system, a system approach. A country has a complex unit part. And when a unit of that, complex whole is not functioning, it affects the whole of the system. And that, is the conceptual approach that explains the albatross of Nigeria.
Thank you so much for that explanation. Now let's go into the difference between self-isolation, self-quarantine, and also social distance. Social distance refers to creating physical distance between people rather than preventing social connection. Just like what we are trying to do right here in the studio, we're trying to do social distancing. So we try to separate ourselves, not because we don't love ourselves or we feel this person has been affected, but you won't know. So it's important as citizens of Nigerians, negotiants, or wherever you're listening to this program, let's try to engage ourselves in social distancing. Okay, now while isolation separates sick people with a quarantinable, communicable disease from people who are not sick, while quarantine separates and restricts the movement of people who were exposed to a contagious disease to see if they become sick. So there are huge difference between these three words: social distancing, self-isolation, and self-quarantine. So let's take a little break. When we come back, we'll look at these coronavirus and how it has affected the economy, and maybe in a way positive or negatively. We'll take a look at that. Let's take this break. We'll be right back.